Thank you for joining our session today, Data-Driven Operations, how Procore data and real-time dashboards help improve projects. This is a really exciting topic. It's a big topic. We only have 40 minutes. We're going to try our best to dive into as much as we can, really, so I'll keep the introduction brief. We have a awesome panel here. They're going to share with you some key insights from their journey leading data-driven companies. So my name is Jordan Foster. I manage our analytics services team here at Procore. And if you use Procore Analytics, there's a pretty good chance that we've probably met. So good to see some familiar faces. Quick update here. You are eligible to receive continuing education credit for attending this session. So if you've pre-registered, you will receive details for that after the conference. Ahead of time, we sent out a survey to registered attendants of this session, just getting some feedback. What did you want to hear about from us? So what are your biggest challenges with reporting and analytics? Some of the most common responses were, we don't have a dedicated resource to work on analytics or reporting. That's a common struggle. We don't know what questions to answer. That's another tough one. Some of the other responses were things like gaining buy-in, not only from the top level, but also in the field. And then just bandwidth. So I'd lump that in with resources as well. And then what really matters to your company to answer with data? Understanding risk, profitability, quality, safety, performance metrics. How are the teams doing? And then some of the others just, we don't know, all of the above. So we're going to, again, do our best to dive into a lot of these topics today. So I want to start by introducing our panel. So as we go down the line, if you just want to introduce yourself, a little bit about your role, and what got you started on this journey. Start with Frank.
Thank you. I guess just one quick data analytic thing. I feel like maybe we didn't drink enough last night. If we're all here, look at this, this group here. The other conference, they looked a lot more haggard than we do. So as a group, we better do better tonight. I'm just throw that out. So my name is Frank Sarno, Vice President of Construction Process and Technology with Adolfson Peterson, former project manager now on the technology side. And so, my journey realistically started a while ago, 15 or so years ago. And what that journey started with, realistically, started with a challenge. And I think that's one of the things, hopefully, that we get a chance to, or once questions and answers start coming, you're going to ask, well, how did you get started? And the challenge came when the CFO had asked me, how are you going to, or we need to try and figure out how we're going to do payroll next week. This was right in the middle of the Great Recession. And he said, what would you do to try and figure that out? And my response back was, are we billing enough? Do we know if we're billing? Are we covering our costs? And are we getting ahead on our bills in order to make payroll next week? I mean, that's where cash flow was for our company. And the question then led to, well, I don't know, go figure that out. Very personal question. I had young kids. I wanted to get paid next week. So we started looking and trying to figure out, and what we uncovered was we weren't covering our costs on our payroll because our owners had the same issues that we were having in terms they were having cash. But we had to try and make sure that we were covering our costs to make sure that we had cash flow. That's where we started. That story led to creating of a data warehouse, starting to have reports that led to advanced reporting, and then to exception-based reporting. So, and I think realistically, as we talk, our journeys will probably be in that vein, right? Starting personal, answer a question, a challenge for the business, and then moving that into some advanced reporting.
Yeah, nice to see everybody. My name is Patrick Hennessy. I'm the Director of Scheduling and Analytics at Harkins Builders. And my journey, while similar in a lot of ways, is a little bit different. I came up through the project controls consulting world. So worked for a couple different consultants doing a lot of construction scheduling and cost management for general contractor clients before coming to Harkins, who's a general contractor. And really what I was hired to do was to do internal scheduling at Harkins because they had gotten to a size where they decided they wanted to move away from doing outsourced consultants. And Scheduling, as I'm sure a lot of you know, creates a lot of data, a ton. So through that and through my consulting experience, we had done one-off Excel dashboards or little things here and there, and I had grown fond of using the data from the schedules to present information to our clients that was a different way of looking at things. And so when I came to Harkins, that was my first actually experience with Procore, and I saw that we were putting all of this project management data into the cloud. And I was like, wow, the same thing that we were doing for clients with this scheduling data, we can do with all of this other data as well. Or at least I thought it was going to be that easy. And from there, our first dashboard was actually safety, because that was a centralized department at Harkins, so that the data was standardized and pretty accurate across our entire project portfolio, which, and we'll talk about this a little bit, wasn't the case for a lot of our other data, and that's kind of how our journey had progressed from there. But so we started with one thing, where we knew the data was accurate with safety, and then really got into a lot of processes and procedures changes to get our data to a place where now we have, across the entire board, data coming from Procore that's accurate enough to report out on and actually make actionable decisions and data-driven insights from.
All right, good morning. I'm Justin Porter. I'm the Director of Construction Technology and Innovation at Truebeck. We're a general contractor in the Bay Area. My background's actually in BIM VDC. Started as kind of a BIM engineer about 12 years ago. And as in the technology world, you get thrown problems you got to kind of try to solve, right? My first, foray into dashboarding, I was working on an underground theater, and we had these humidity sensors all over, and the owner wanted to visualize the data. That really got me into Power BI, and I showed some of the leadership, and they're like, oh, how about we look at chargeability? How about we look at all this other data, financials primarily at that point? And that really, kind of evolved quickly. They were all used to looking at a lot of, text-based reports, PDF reports, and really the visualization helped open their eyes. I was still doing BIM VDC at the time, but it's kind of ballooned, and that's really where we started our data department, data group, and that's where Bryce came in. So.
Hi, I'm Bryce Savoy, and I also work for Truebeck Construction. My role is a data engineer. I primarily move data from A to B and build some of the dashboards we have within our company. And my journey is very different. I actually started just with an internship, and it started with an idea from our vice president. We were going after an RFP. It was like a $2 billion project. Needed a lot of manpower to be on the project, and we just wanted to tell a unique story in the interview. And frankly, I didn't know about Power BI, but my internship gave me the opportunity to learn and just to try new ideas. And from there, we built a pretty cool report, helped tell the story, and our data journey evolved over time. It was an unexpected win. We didn't have a data warehouse at that time, but it helped us show the value of different reporting tools we could make to clients. And I think we'll tell a little bit more about the journey in the rest of our talk here.
Yeah, and just really quickly, if I could, I think a really good takeaway from what we just described is, Frank started with financials. We started with safety. These guys started with VDC. There's no right place. There's no one place where this journey can kick off. It's really a culture thing where you got to dedicate yourself and say, we're going to use our data. We might not know exactly how yet, but we're going to use it to make ourselves a better company and make our people's lives easier. And I think that's really interesting to hear all of us have a different starting point and really a different path to where we all are now.
Well said. That is definitely a key takeaway we want you to walk away from. There is, no one way to go about this. So let's talk about early obstacles.
Want to go first?
Sure. The first obstacle that we really had was realizing our data was bad. So when we started to actually dive into the weeds and look at, and I know I touched on this a little bit, safety was actually good data for us, and that was because we had one department that was doing things the same way on every different project that they were going out to with their safety inspections and things like that. When we actually started diving into the project by project, the way people were inputting data for financials or quality control inspections or even things like RFIs and submittals, it was different across the entire board. And we didn't have anybody, when we had first turned on Procore to really help standardize all of those processes. So, very lucky for me, and I think the guy is in the crowd here somewhere. When I started and really started diving into the analytics, we had also had another guy start who was very process oriented. And me and him together were able to, him very much focused on the process side and me helping from hey, we should do it this way because this will be a better way for us to get the data at the end, create processes for every single thing that we were doing in Procore. Because obviously, crap in, crap out, if we weren't doing the things that we needed to from a company perspective to get our data into the system accurately standardized, the output in terms of the insights you're going to get from it was not going to be good. And for really the first 2 years, that was our primary focus, and our challenge was changing the fundamental way that people had become accustomed to doing things to be a new way that we had determined was the way that we wanted to input our information into Procore.
So one of the fundamental... Is that on? So one of the fundamental themes that I think we will touch on a couple of different ways is data and how that works with your processes. And the data will actually help you improve your processes. If you're just looking to do reports, then you're missing half of the equation. Because every report that you write should ultimately start with how your processes feed into that. And then there's a continuous feedback loop that kind of helps. We're going to touch on it a couple different ways. But that's one of your early obstacles in terms of data and making sure that it's correct. Another one realistically is trust. When you show this report to whoever, whether it's a CFO or a superintendent, you have to make sure that they trust what you're showing them. And that's not an easy thing. You can't just show them a report and say, well, that's what it says. So there's a learning curve there with the people that you're showing these reports. Don't underestimate that. Trust is very important when you start talking about the data. And then you might have to show them how you got it, found it, and now this is a report that they're going to use. People are busy. They want to rely on things that work. So make sure that trust building is part of it's part of that process of building those reports.
Now, I know I'm going to kind of jump ahead of the gun here because gaining buy-in is a whole other conversation we could talk about here. But one of the early obstacles we had at Truebeck was we knew the value of making dashboards. We knew the value of trying to increase our reporting from more of a static approach to something that would update and something that you could distribute very easily. However, building reports for the sake of trying to get more involved in data isn't a successful strategy. We tried to release a lot of interesting reports that we thought was going to help decision making within the company, but they kind of just fizzled. They didn't get the traction that they deserved, and frankly, it's because we didn't have a conversation with the people who were going to actually use these reports. We didn't necessarily start with an actual problem, and that's, I think, a topic we really want to hone in on this discussion today. Is the way to get started is to start by having conversations and starting with a problem and how to solve it. Because if you're not, solving a problem, data isn't going to be actionable. It's not going to lead to better decision making, and frankly, it's just going to create more work for people in the long run, which is not what we're trying to do. We're trying to save people time, help make decisions faster, quicker, and better with some of the reports we build.
While we're talking about early obstacles, let's talk about gaining buy-in and why that's important, not only at the top but in the field as well. Oh, sorry.
Well, so realistically, when you're talking about gaining buy-in, we have and we joke about this at work because we have a couple of guys that write reports, and they have this concept that they love to talk about, and it frustrates the heck out of me. We're going to throw the spaghetti against the wall and see what sticks, and I always say that's the wrong approach. I get what they want, why they want to do that. Maybe someone finds it interesting, and they want that report. From an operations perspective, you want reporting that's useful, not interesting. If it doesn't create a decision, if it doesn't create an action, then that report is just something to look at. That's just a pretty dashboard with the red, green, and yellow lights. From an operations perspective, we want action. And so we don't want interesting reports, right? Those are baseball statistics, right? We want useful. We want action. We want something that's going to, from that perspective, and what we can touch on a little bit later, we've got this concept called exception-based reporting. But that's what we want, not interesting. We want useful. Useful drives a superintendent to make a phone call. Useful reporting drives a CFO to ask a construction executive what's going on in this project.
So for me, buy-in comes down to two things. Number one, if the report or whatever you're doing with your data is making somebody's life easier, it will just naturally get buy-in anyway. But the second thing is having the momentum and being able to project that out to the other areas of your organizations that might not even be aware that you're doing things with your data. And what I've had success with is, instead of me being the proponent, because people look at us and they say, oh, those are the tech nerds. They don't know what we're doing out here in the field. They don't know this. What you have to do is you have to find the person, the project manager, the lead superintendent, who will be the champion of what you're doing and the problems you're solving with your data, and have them project it to their colleagues, because it is a lot more powerful coming from them to others who are in the exact same roles than someone like myself.
Yeah, at Truebeck, we actually have a project health dashboard. It's kind of a summary that pulls data in from a lot of different data sources. And we built it, probably 2 years ago originally, and it really just didn't get the traction that we wanted. We were working with project managers, a couple of project executives. They were using it on their projects, a little bit. There's a couple champions, if you will. But until we really sat down with our VPs of operations and leadership team to see what's important to them and what they wanted to hold the projects accountable to, we really didn't get that buy-in. So we needed that leadership buy-in, and we actually, kind of to kick it off, the VPs would meet with a couple projects every couple weeks and just go through the dashboard. Not necessarily saying this is good or bad, just explaining, hey, this is the data. How are we gonna make this actionable? What are you gonna do about this? So that, and really, that's really helped us evolve that dashboard. It is so different than it was 2 years ago. I mean, it changes weekly, and that's one of the big projects that Bryce is working on. So.
Yeah, you're right back to the conversation aspect and feedback loop that's become so important of creating long-term reporting versus just something that you splash onto a page.
Yeah, I want to build on that. My background is not in construction. I was an industrial engineer, studied at school, and any way I can save people time and improve the process, that's what I love. That's what gets me out of bed in the morning. But frankly, yeah, I'm one of the data nerds. I don't have the operational knowledge to create actionable insights, so it's really important for me to establish a healthy feedback loop for one of the internal developers that is making some of these reports that our leadership is building. And that translates into another topic I want to touch on is, how do we avoid a big brother culture when we're trying to push all of these analytics and these data-driven reports within our company? And I think what really helps is it starts from the leadership level, and frankly, our Project Health dashboard. The conversations that we're having isn't necessarily to get people in trouble, but it's supposed to, our goal is to help people. We want to know, hey, are there any issues going on in your project? What's going on here? Do you need any other resources? I think that's really important to know when you're trying to get into these kind of principles, is making it more of an informal discussion really helped us adopt a more data-driven culture, and without that kind of vibe, we wouldn't have been able to be as successful.
All right, I want to shift in a little bit and talk about metrics. I think the common question we all get all the time is, what's everybody else doing? What are they measuring? So with that in mind, is there something that all companies should be measuring, and how do you go about defining a KPI or a metric?
So I can start here. For us, you know, metrics and KPIs are something that everyone naturally wants to start there, right? And we attempted that as well, actually, by determining, you know, 10 metrics that were going to predict success for us, and we built this dashboard surrounding it. And it was all well and good. It looked very cool, and it ultimately got used for nothing. So after that experience, you know, I started to think of a different approach, and really the approach that I think is best with data in general. And that was going to our end users and saying, what problem or what process can we help make easier, or what problem can we solve for you using our data? And after they thought about it, came back with an answer, we worked backwards from that. So the actionable outcome and the ability to do something about the information that you're seeing, that's the most important part. You know, you can come up with probably 10 lagging or leading indicators that you all think might help your organizations. But at the end of the day, are the people who are using the reports, using the data, is it helping them have those conversations and figure out what problems that they want to be solved, and then start to build backwards from there. And the metrics will just come naturally after that.
So how many CFOs are in the room? Are there any? One. All right. How many of you have a CFO that's got their MBA somewhere? Sorry. They got their MBA somewhere, and they turn to you and say, I need the 4 KPIs in construction industry, and then we'll make more money if we could make those better. I don't know if that exists, because if that exists, someone would be selling it. I think from a KPI metric, what each individual company needs to do is look and see, from your perspective, if there were numbers that we improved, we would do better as an organization. Margins would increase, right? Risk would be lowered. Those KPIs, from my perspective, are personal, and you've got to find them. And you find them through time. You're not going to be able to start this journey on day 1 and say, we're going to hit 7. 7's the number. We're not sure if 7's the number or not. It takes some time to get there. So part of this idea, and what I'm really saying is, when you get someone that says, when you start on this journey, or if you're somewhere on the journey and someone says, what are the KPIs that we should be using? I think you should push back a little bit and say, we're not sure yet what those KPIs are. We're going to find those through time. And when we find them, we're going to then really hone in operationally to make us better. Increase a little margin, you know, maybe reduce some risk in some ways. We find things all the time when we're looking through the data. We found one the other day where we found something that we didn't know, and we immediately pivoted back operationally to make sure that that's something, because it would reduce our risk if this would lower. Now, my pushback is, because we hear this all the time, what are the KPIs for construction? I don't know if those exist, and that's part of what I'm saying. For you, you need to find the numbers that make you better. And when you do, hone in on it and really try and make that work for your individual company.
Yeah, I'll definitely second that. They'll evolve over time. One thing that we've learned is people don't know what they want until they see something they don't want, right? You put something on a dashboard like, that's not how I want to see it. Okay, how do you want to see it? But you probably wouldn't have had that conversation if they didn't have something in front of them to talk about. So, I mean, you do need to kind of start with, you know, the problem and how you're going to solve it, but you may not come up with the right metric or the right visualization for that metric right away, and that will evolve. And what we've learned is you just have to be okay with that evolution. You cannot get married to an idea or a visual or however you're communicating, because just because it seems right to you doesn't mean that it's going to be useful to the organization. So you really need to work with everybody with it that's going to be using the dashboards and make sure that the information makes sense to them and it's actionable to them.
Yeah, I do want to add something. I want to build on, it's a continuous process. I have conversations with my counterpart in operations twice a week, and I've made hundreds of iterations on our project health dashboard. And frankly, it has evolved from what it was a couple years ago. And it's interesting. Like, these KPIs we thought we were gonna start with, they're completely different now. And it's only because we had the conversations with people and we were flexible enough to change the way we thought about some of the metrics we were building. And that's what led to our success. And that's when people started to trust the data, and that's when people ended up having more ideas. It really does gain momentum until the earlier conversation you have, the better the outcome is.
I'm just going to share a quick story. This does take time, right? It's very hard to just flip a switch, have your data connect to a bunch of metrics, and then, oh, these are going to make us more profitable, or these are going to make us a better company. And a good story I'll share, and kind of ties back into what we're talking about, where you don't really know the metrics you want to track until you start on your data journey. We started requiring our project sites to log safety violations using the daily log tool probably about 3 or 4 years ago. And initially, one would think, at least my brain would think, okay, the more safety violations I see on projects, the less safe, the more incidents, the more injuries we'll have on these projects, right? We're working with a bunch of subcontractors who potentially aren't that safe or what may have you. 3 years in, we've analyzed the data, we've compared it to our incident data and also our safety inspection data. And what we've found is that the more safety violations that our teams are logging in the daily log, the safer our projects actually are. Less injuries, less incidents, and higher safety inspection scores. And now that we take a step back and look at that, it makes sense. They're following the processes that we've put in place to make our job sites safer. But again, 3 years ago when we first started this, my thought would have been more violations, less safe project. That wasn't the case now that we've been able to analyze our information 3 years later. And that's why I would just encourage all of you to just start collecting your data and looking for ways and correlations between processes and results, and the metrics will just come.
Yeah, you improve what you can measure. If you don't measure it, it's really hard to improve on that. So that, in that story, as you start measuring how things are going, then things start to improve.
Yep.
What about, just want to keep going on that just a little bit. What about testing theories and experimentation and also setting the expectations around that? Anything to add there? Everyone's
got their own theory, right? My advice would be is to hear as many of them as possible and to work towards as many of them as possible, because maybe only 1 out of those 10 theories will prove to be something valuable, but you never would have gotten to that 1 out of 10 if you didn't test all 10 of them. So if people are willing to talk and ask for things that we can do with our information, our data, listen and build off of what they're saying.
Patrick, you brought up something that I want to bring home here, and it's about sometimes people have all these different ideas about what metrics are going to solve real problems, and sometimes having a little bit more context makes a better decision. Sometimes one number doesn't tell a story. Someone might think, one day late on an RFI is a leading indicator. Sometimes it might be 2 or 3 days for someone, but realistically, we saw more improvement in decision making when we got to see KPIs over time. Like, sure, this number is 3 or 4 days late today, but what was it a couple weeks ago? It might have been much worse, and they're continuing on a trend. And that really aids some of the conversations that could be had, because sometimes one number doesn't tell the whole story.
So you asked about theories. And one of the theories that we have right now that we're testing out is something that we've internally called exception-based reporting. And it came from people asking about predictive. We want to get to predictive analytics. And so we started, this theory of ours was, we have rules in our company, and we wanted to see how often those rules got broken, and then basically send a flare up that says that now there's an exception. What do we do about it? So we started this theory, and we thought there's 100 rules. We'll break them 3 times a week. We started with 5 rules, and we broke them every 15 minutes. And so then now we start sending flares to people, and it was too much. So we dialed back. So now again, we're back to, we still think there's something there. It's our theory that what we want are these alerts and notifications, these exceptions to go to a construction executive, not to hammer on a project engineer when they break that exception or that rule. It's to start a conversation. Are you sure you're checking everything? Is everything correct here? So that's, right now, that's kind of the theory that we have running. We feel like it's a step before predictive, because if we can get the exceptions and then create that becomes your dashboard, versus saying, here's a number, this is where we're at. It's now, these exceptions happened, these are things we should start and take action on, and at least open up a conversation between maybe a construction executive and a project engineer, or a superintendent and an assistant superintendent, based on what those rules are. We're still working our way through that. We still break too many rules, too many exceptions, but as we mature, we think that this is going to be something. It's this idea of exception-based. That's the theory we got running right now.
That's awesome. Unfortunately, I'm going to shift two questions. And as part of the survey that we sent out, we asked, what questions do you have for our panel here? And so we did our best to kind of consolidate some of those, and we're going to start with a couple, and then if we have time, we'll open it up to the group here. So what tools or processes have you deployed to assist with accurate reporting? What are the tools you're using?
Yeah, I guess I'll start. I mean, Power BI was the first really tool that got us into it. I mean, I started with Power BI just tied to Excel files, right? It's amazing what you can do just visualizing data that used to live in a tabular format before. So that really kind of started the whole data movement within Truebeck. And then we hired data engineers, and we did a lot of our own kind of back-end SQL work and extract, transform, load, pull into the data center. But I will say now there are so many tools out there available that allow you to connect to APIs and pull this data in, or they'll even provide a data warehouse for you. So even in the last couple of years, there's so many more tools that it is easier than it was 3 years ago to do this.
Yeah, we've tried a lot of different things. Power BI is one of the primary reporting tools we use right now, but we've used Tableau in the past. We have a Snowflake as a data warehouse. I've used Matillion for a little while as a ETL tool, and now we're actually using Fivetran. All of these tools I'm talking about require, and something we haven't really touched on, but was one of the biggest things in the survey was resources and people who know how to do this stuff. And unfortunately, construction companies, I mean, we have small margins, and we very, very much so try to keep margin down, or overhead down, excuse me. And that doesn't really play out well for hiring large data teams. So what I have looked for to help our people are tools that can streamline the process and take that, doing that ETL and getting it into a data warehouse and then delivering it to a Power BI and having a business analyst that can build that report for you, kind of bring that all into one. So recently we actually partnered with a group called Projection, which I would encourage all of you to check out. They're doing just that, and they're really finding those actionable things that will help you make decisions without needing a 5-person data team to get to that end result. So I'm always looking for more tools, as we all know, and why we're all here. The innovation in construction is booming right now, and there's going to be people that figure this out. But anything that can help streamline our process, that's mainly what I look for.
Yeah, I think the journey that, whether you're starting or if you're 10 years in, the only thing that's assured is that journey is going to be littered with tools that you no longer use, because you try things and then you go to the next thing and you try the next thing. And so from that aspect, realistically, if you're wondering where do you start, there's 2 different things. You need a visualization tool like Power BI or Tableau or something like that, but you also need some sort of extraction methodology. The easy part is, it used to be 10, 15 years ago when we started this, you needed dedicated IT resources and maybe a couple of them. Now there's services that will help you do that, and they will hook into your applications and extract the data. So those services that, are in the hall. So there's 2 different things, and if you're just starting that journey, my suggestion would be to talk with a company and try and understand, what's that cost? What does that look like? What do you get for that from the extraction side so that you can start the visualization and really starting to try and answer your questions of what challenges exist and things that you can solve with the data.
Awesome, thank you. So what tips do you have to get started, or maybe asking another way, what's something you could do tomorrow? Or what's something that everybody here could do tomorrow?
Just look at the quality of your data that you are putting into the systems that you're paying a lot of money to have people use. And my number one piece of advice would be take a look at that information, find out where it is not being input the same way across the teams that you have in your organizations that are supposed to be doing things similarly, and work towards standardizing and finding, through the help of the people who are doing the input, the best process to do that that's going to provide data for you. I think that is the step that needs to be taken before we can do anything cool with the data that we have. And if you're looking for a place to start, just take a look at your information, figure out where there's inconsistencies, and start to make them consistent.
I couldn't agree more on the data. I think one question before that would be, if you haven't done anything and you're starting at step one, what do you want to try and solve with this? What answers do you want to get? And then once you do that, then you start looking at the data and making sure that you're going to get it, because the idea of trying to understand what you're trying to do and what you're trying to solve. If you're going to try and solve if day one you're going to try and create a project health dashboard with a scorecard based off of your financials and whatever information you're pulling out of Procore, that's the wrong place to start. Ask one question, then ask the question about data. Is your data going to solve that question? And if it's when you look at that process, if you're not requiring things, you're probably not going to get the answer on the back end on your reporting. Once you do that, then I'd start looking at internal reporting tools to whatever systems that you have. Start there, and then go to the next step, which is, okay, now I want to start trying to extract and mash data together.
I want to build on that, Frank. This does not happen overnight. It starts small, and it starts with one problem, and that's really when it takes foot. You can't really just try to solve nothing with no strategy. So start small, let's try to solve an idea, and you'll gain traction once you have real conversations when you're trying to solve a problem.
One thing I'll add is you got to kind of meet people where they are. Like a lot of the people in our leadership and who are in running Truebeck, they're used to emails, PDFs, they're used to reports, right? And to say, oh, just go look at the dashboard. You have to go to this website or go in Teams or go here. They're not used to doing that. Like that's totally changing how they work. So I mean, believe it or not, like we are a data-driven company. We have all these dashboards, but guess what we've set up in the last few weeks? We literally email out dashboards to people because that's where they are right now, right? We can't go in and expect that, hey, everybody's just going to go look at this dashboard. They're not going to. It's not part of their daily, routines, and it takes a long time to change that routine. So now that we're sending out the emails, we have data of who's looking at dashboards. They're pulling up that PDF, they're looking at it, but guess what? Now they're clicking the link and they're actually looking at the dashboard online too. So like figuring out how do you take those baby steps, those incremental steps to get people to change their habits. Because yeah, it takes a long time.
If there's one thing I might add to that too, just don't try to boil the ocean. There's a lot of data out there. There's so much information. It's so easy to get overwhelmed and you get stuck. So if you have a lot of ideas, think about prioritization, starting small. Where are the quick wins? Unfortunately, I think we're coming up on time here, but I do invite everybody, please come down. If you haven't already, stop by the Construction Intelligence Innovation Lab in the Expo Hall. The panel here has graciously agreed to come down and answer some follow-up questions if you have them after the session here. So hope to see you there. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.